Welcome to Dental Business RX. Practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Thank you for calling ABC Dental.
So you're looking at starting a new practice. Maybe it's your first office. Maybe it's an additional location in your growing dental empire. In any event, the first questions that usually come to mind when you're doing this are, 1, where is this practice going to be? 2, how much do you want to spend? And 3, should you start the practice from scratch or buy an existing office? Now, each option has its merits, but what's best for you and your specific situation really depends on a number of things. And that's what I want to talk about in this week's episode. We'll take a look at how to make the ideal choice based on, obviously I can't make the choice for you, but we're going to take a look at how to make the ideal choice based on your current situation. My name is Jeff Bloomberg, and I'm your host. And what inspired this episode, because, I've danced around this subject a few times and been meaning to make something like this for a while, was watching some of the advice that I was seeing administered online, as well as some of the stuff I was seeing on socials, on our company socials. And a lot of that advice was weighted towards, I would never buy an established practice. I would always start my own practice from scratch. Now, straight up, how someone could give that advice with no consideration or understanding of someone's circumstances was a bit puzzling to me. I think there's a time and a place for each, but the route you pick, like I said, depends on a number of variables. So let's walk through this. Let's start with just, and this is, again, by no means an exhaustive list, but let's start with a quick list of the pros and cons of each setup. So if I start a practice from scratch, what are some of the pros? It's my place. It's built to my spec, to whatever degree I can fit within, the place I'm building it. It's my vision. I've got the exact equipment that I want. There's no real limitations other than the spaces limitations that I would have, or not. The limitations aren't similar to me buying someone else's place. Also, there's no gun to my head. I mean that figuratively, folks, to have to close by a certain date. Sure, there's deadlines with contractors and landlords and whatnot, but it's not like on the 20th of May, I have to close on this practice and take over from Dr. So-and-so because I'm building it myself, right? So the only people I'm really reporting to are contractors, the bank if I'm financing it, etc., right? Suppliers and whatnot. There's no doctor I'm taking over for whose the patient's affections I'm going to have to vie for instead of them. It's mine. There's also another issue, which is credentialing. So, my viewpoint on this. I wouldn't join networks. I'm very anti PPO, and I think it bodes very poorly long-term for dentistry, especially what's happening with dentists economically, which I'll be doing an episode on here in a week or two. But let's say it's something that you're doing. You're going to credential for this office, because credentialing is usually tied to the provider and the tax ID of the practice. So if, and this is, again, I've seen people go back and forth on this. If I am in one practice and I'm credentialed with whoever I'm credentialed with, if I go to a whole other office or I start another practice, I've seen it where people have to re-credential. So if I'm starting my practice from scratch, I have all the time in the world to credential at that point, based upon what I want to open, versus if I'm taking over a practice from somebody else, and let's say they're heavily in network with a particular plan, and I've only got 2 months as part of the purchasing process. If I can't credential on time, I can't accept those plans, right? So there is that pro of starting your own place. But like I said, I don't consider being a network a pro. And funnily enough, I had a client take over 2 offices, actually out of state. They have an office up north, and they bought some practices down here. And they couldn't get credentialed for the plans that the doc was taking before that they were buying from, so they just were automatically out of network, and it actually worked out a lot better for them in the long term. Anyway, so let's look at some of the cons, all right? So obviously it's a longer ramp-up period. If I'm starting from scratch, unless I really have my act together with regards to marketing and new patients, it's going to take me longer to get that or turn that into a full-time practice and get it established, right? Also, when I start, there's no cash flow. I'm living off of my working cap because there's no established patient base. All right, so there's the pros and the cons. Like I said, there's a lot more. I'm sure if you gave me time to sit and think about it for an hour, but I don't know how interesting that is to listen to the pros and cons of a scratch practice, but those are the big ones. Now, what about an established practice? What are the pros? There's cash flow. It's a going concern. It's been established. It's like a known thing. There's a dental practice in this strip mall on this corner in this, in this building. So the ramp up is potentially a lot faster because there's activity in this business already. And in some cases, and they're used to coming there, there's established goodwill. And the other aspect of that is depending on which practice I'm buying. Let's say I'm buying it from a practice where the doctor's kind of wanting to phase out and has been practicing for a while. And I'm not trying to give you like a stereotype here, but we've all seen this where if you go into a doc's office and they've been practicing for a while, maybe they're not as aggressive treatment planning wise as they were 10 years, 20 years prior. So you might find some treatment to do, whereas when you're starting from scratch, you'd find treatment to do too. But in this case, this is sort of ready made. These patients are already established and coming into this office. And assuming it's a good purchase, then it should be well set up to be able to do a decent turnover from the owner doc. Also, there's something pretty critical to think with here on purchasing an existing practice, which is, and I've covered bits and pieces of this over the years in the podcast, and I'm about to do another big episode on this in the next week or two, sort of the state of dentistry. But based on current dental demographics, I'll give this to you sort of in a nutshell. 34% of the 200,000 doctors are 55 and over. So we're seeing a large chunk of practicing dentists approaching retirement age. Now, when are they going to retire? I don't know. I mean, and this isn't an ageism thing, just to be clear. But, look, I'm in my 50s. If you said, Jeff, how much longer are you going to work? I'm not going to work for 30 more years. Whereas if you asked me in my 30s, I'd probably say 30 more years. So there's a reality of it, okay? So if someone, the average retirement age in dentistry is 68.1 or 7 or something like this, according to the ADA. So if you got 50,000 doctors 60 and over, well, they're 10 years away from retirement in this case. Some are already at retirement or prototypical retirement age. Not everybody retires at that point, but whatever. But that's sort of how that works. The other side of that is most of the practices, over 40% of the practices in the United States, are owned by doctors 55 and over. So do the math on that in your head. Docs 55 and over own 4 out of 10 practices or 2 out of 5 practices. If you're 55 and over, you're 13 years or less, if you're part of the over group, from what is the average dentist retirement age in the United States. So what that tells you is you have a lot of practices. There's approximately 130,000 practices-ish locations in the United States. Let's say between, and this is a tough ask, 10 to 20,000 are owned by DSOs. So that leaves us with maybe 110 to 100, let's say 120,000 practices in the U.S. are privately owned. So 41% of those privately owned practices will be most likely on the market in the next 10 to 15 years. Do you see? So if that's the case, you go, okay, cool, there's going to be a glut of practices on the market. There's a lot of places for sale, which wouldn't be that big of a deal if younger doctors were buying offices. And again, like I said, I'm going to get into detail on this in a couple weeks. Not this, but just this is one of the things, a lot of other things. But younger doctors are not buying offices anymore. To give you a little bit of a snippet, in 2005, over a quarter, 25% of doctors under 30 owned a dental practice. That number is 8.8% now. I'll say it again. 1 out of 4 dentists under 30 owned a practice in 2005. As of 2023 or 2024, it's 8.8%. 8.8 out of 100 own a practice. And it gets worse or not worse, but it stays that bad, the 30 to 34 group, the 35 to 44 group. The ownership percentages are way lower than they used to be until you hit the 55 and over group, in which case those guys, especially 55 to 64 and 45 to 54, the ownership rates in those brackets are about what they were 20 years ago. So what that tells you is most of the practices are owned by folks 55 and over or 45 and over, number one. Number two, younger doctors aren't buying. So we're going to end up with a glut of practices that most likely, as these practices sell over the next 10 to 15 years, that are just not going to get bought. They're going to get closed. They're going to get woven into another practice. Their charts are going to sell because not all of them are going to be DSO targets or acquisition targets because younger docs aren't buying. So whenever you have a situation where there's a lot of something, meaning supply, and there's not as much demand, the price of said thing goes down. higher demand or higher supply than demand, price goes down. It's like real estate. If there's a lot of houses on the market and you got your you can pick from whatever you want to pick from. It's a buyer's market. Houses are going to be cheaper. Whereas if you have 10 people in a hedge fund competing for one house, that price is going to go up. It's going to go above what was considered market value. That's higher demand than supply. Well, we're about to walk into a decade where there's going to be a huge amount of supply and very little demand comparatively on dental practices. So, if I build a scratch practice, the cost of equipment has dropped dramatically over the last 10, 15 years, where I can get chairs and a cone beam and whatever pretty cheap. But the cost of plumbing and build out has not gone down, it's gone up. Whereas if I can buy a practice, an existing office, and it's a buyer's market, I'm going to get a really good deal on that. In some cases, I might even get the seller to carry some of the financing. That to me is a huge pro. So I'm getting this office that already has patients, and the seller is very motivated because there aren't a lot of buyers, you see. And I'll get into that in a little bit here too. But that's a big pro for me on an existing office. Now, what are some of the cons? I'm dealing with the doctor I'm buying it from, which that might be cool or it might be horrible. Really, that's completely situational. I've seen some deals that are just beautiful, and I've seen some deals that are bad, right? The equipment might be old. It may not be what I like or what I want or what I use. The layout may be terrible. I have this teeny-weeny front desk with a window in the wall, and I don't like it, right? But those things to me, I have to decide what's a deal breaker and what's not when I'm buying this thing, right? But those are some of the cons, right, as far as buying an existing office. And let me back up to on this purchase concept again here for a second before we get into kind of rolling this out. So if I build an existing office, I'm going to have to, if it's on a lease, I'm going to have to pay for build out and plumbing and whatnot. I'm going to have to, cabinetry. I'm going to have to buy equipment, put everything where I want it, get the appropriate permits. It's going to take, depending on where I'm building, some places build like that. Other places, it's just a nightmare to build in and it takes 20 times longer than it's supposed to. I have to design it. There's a lot of work that goes into that. And like I said, the rewards are I get exactly what I want, right? Okay. If I'm buying an existing office, and I'm going to spend whatever I spend, I'm getting a better deal on the equipment these days, but the build out can get expensive. If I'm buying an existing office, if I'm buying in a buyer's market, I'm going to get a good deal potentially. And that's when we start to get into the valuations on these practices a bit. So private equity entering the dental space, and it's very prevalent in the dental space. I think if I saw a statistic recently, and I don't want to take too much from this episode I'm doing in a couple of weeks, but I think it's the space that is most participated in, healthcare space, is dentistry by PE, I believe, by private equity. But anyway, is they distorted the valuation methodology. If you went back to the 90s and early 2000s and you were hunting for a practice to buy, the accepted number was 70% of last year's collections. That was the accepted number. So if the place collected $500,000 last year, the starting point was $350,000. Now, that number could go up or that number could go down, depending on the age of the equipment and, things of that nature, right? Or, how in demand practices are in that area or were in that area. I remember right before the real estate crash in 2008, I sound like a historian now, right? 2008 wasn't that long ago in my mind, folks. But talking to a doc who paid 100% of the prior year's collections in Orange County, California. And that was just because there was a lot of people buying offices there at the time. You'll sometimes get some distortions regionally. If there's a lot of demand, people are moving there. There's a lot of demand, like Texas. A lot of people were moving into Texas. Practice prices went up. Basic market forces, right? But 70% was sort of the accepted thing. And then that changed over the years to, it was multiple of EBITDA. And we won't get into EBITDA. Let's just call it profit to keep it simple. All right. So, if my profit was $1 million a year, I'm getting a 5x multiple of my EBITDA. And real math, how that worked out, I had a client whose practice was doing $4 million. And normally a 70% purchase would have been $2.8 million. He ended up getting, I think, $7 or $8 million because it was a multiple of his EBITDA. It was a very profitable practice. The problem with that, there's a couple problems, is one, what owner doctor is going to go buy a practice that's doing $4 million? Like, very few people are in that position financially. So you pretty much filter out who your buyers are at that point. Your buyers are people, corporations who have money. Because I've seen this happen to our client base. A lot of our clients have larger offices, number one. Number two, if a private buyer comes to that practice that's doing $4 million, they're going to want to pay 2.8, whereas DSO is going to pay 7. So, okay, like that's just math, right, guys? I mean, what are you going to do, right? So that distorted the valuation methodology in people's minds. I mean, it can get so bad where I was talking to a client who was selling one of their offices, and their broker wasn't even giving a price. Was it like one of those places where, if you have to ask the price, you shouldn't be shopping here? I don't know what the heck that was. So they were listing their practice, and they didn't list it with a price. So then people would make an offer based on the financials. I just can't even understand that. Like, that's the dumbest broker technique I think I've ever seen. And I'm sure they have some study to tell me how it works. It doesn't work. I'm just going to tell you right now. Generally, you at least have to know what to offer. Okay, you want 700, I'll offer you 650 based on your numbers. You should at least start with a price. If your broker tells you not to list a price, I'm happy to challenge the wrongness of their assertion. But you know what? Who am I? Anyway, so because you're going to be walking into a buyer's market, you can definitely use the 70% number, which means, let's say it's 70%, but it's an area where they're not getting a lot of bites. You can bump it to 60 or 65 or 55. I had a client who bought a practice for 55%. It was a beautiful office, newer office. The guy couldn't find a buyer, so our client bought it. So you have a little bit more flexibility with what's going on. The other thing that you have to consider as you're doing all this is working capital. Because, even if you buy an existing office, you're still going to need some cash just in case. And definitely if you buy a scratch practice, you're going to need cash. So that goes into your number. You might be looking at a practice and going, oh, this is cool. It's $500,000, but how much working cap do you need? Do you need $150? Now you're looking at $650. Whole different ballgame, right? All right, so let's get back to our initial considerations here. So here you are. You're an associate doctor, and you're like ready to go out on your own. That could be one way. Or you might be an established practitioner and you're looking at adding a satellite location or maybe a third location. All right. So the first question would be, where is this office going to be? So obviously there's going to be different considerations there. If I own a practice, I want a second office or a third office, the first thing do not build an office too close to your office. That's the first thing I would say. Please don't do that. I've seen people say, oh, it's great. I got the second office and we can share patients between the two offices. Please, in the name of all that is holy and good, do not do that. You're just setting yourself up. You're basically now doing a practice with two overheads. Set it up far enough away. And how far, people go, well, how far, Jeff? I don't know. It really depends on where you work. If you're in Manhattan, it might be, a mile. If you're in my area here in the Tampa Bay area, it might be 5 or 6 miles. You don't want to share patients between offices. Now, that said, if you wanted to do a strategy where you had one big main office and had like sort of a hub of practices around the main office, sort of like spokes, in a wheel, and you want it far enough away to where these practices can do fine on their own, but maybe for really specialized procedures, they come to the main office. I'm a fan of that. But I wouldn't go to one office for a cleaning and the other office for a cleaning. I might go to the main office, which is a little further away because I need to get, implants or something along these lines. Anyway, that's fine. If you're an associate, you want to pick where you want to work. Now, a couple things I will tell you. What tends to happen, especially for whatever reason with the younger generation of doctors, is they've all clustered in urban areas, near cities. And I understand, food's better, restaurants are better, it's more of a scene, a nightlife, you're younger or whatever. But the ratio of dentists to patients in rural areas versus urban areas is hugely different. So if I'm in a urban area, it's going to be in the 60s. There's going to be 60 dentists for every 1,000 patients, right? In a rural area, I'm looking in the 30s. It'll be 32, 33. These are the national averages. Patients or dentists for every 1,000 patients. You start off with a much more of a leg up. So if I were looking, I'm an associate, I'm licensed in a particular place, I might look at, it depends on what you want, obviously, but I would want to pick a place where I have a great chance of success, long-term success, right? So maybe I'm in a major city. I would go outside the major city and look at practices for sale out there. Those guys might also be having a hard time selling because no one wants to practice out there. But I don't know, it's just something I would throw out there. If I was a young doctor today, you said, Jeff, how would you do this? I would probably go to an area that's considered to be underserved. And the underserved is a category from the Department of Health and Human Services. It's actually a department of the Health and Human Services who decided this. I forget the name of the department, the acronym. But basically, it's a certain number of dentists or a certain number of patients per dentist. I think it's like one dentist for every 4,000 patients or something like this, right? Underserved areas are a dynamite way to start. If you're just starting from scratch, okay? Like, hey, I just want to go off and do my own thing. That's what I'd tell you. Go to an underserved area, find a practice, or you might have to build a practice. We'll talk about that in a second, and work there. You're going to be busier than gangbusters. It's going to be great. I would also check other things. There's a number of things I'd check, demographics as far as incomes and things of that nature. And do people actually live where I'm practicing? But like, funny story, when I met Dr. Winteregg for the first time, Greg, who, he's a former partner here in the company. You probably heard of Greg before. Great guy. And I went and actually signed him up in 1992. I went to his practice, and he was in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, right? And I literally, to find his office, I saw a grain silo that said dentist on it with an arrow, all right? Which for City Slicker Jeff was not the ideal situation, but whatever. So the first question I asked him when he's like, he wants help with his practice, he needs more new patients, blah, blah, blah. The first question I asked was, where are the people? Like, are there any people here? And there were like 12,000 people in his county. He was super busy, or had been at one point. He needed help at that point. He's like, oh, they're across town. There's a Walmart, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay, good, because I didn't want to sign him up for something if there were no people. The point being is, in rural areas, you're facing a lot less headwinds than if you're setting yourself up. I'm not saying you can't be successful in an urban area. You absolutely can. But that's one of the considerations I would look for is dentist to patient ratio. And why not, right? But so let's say here I am. I'm either opening my second, third office, or I'm doing, my first office on my own. So I need to pick where. So let's say I find my where for whatever reason. I like it here. I live near here. I like this area. I would recommend you have some connection to the area, or you have some liking or affinity for it. Maybe you like it. It's near a lake you always liked, or something. I don't know, whatever. You have to want to go there every day because you'll be going there every day for years. So let's say you pick your area, right? So the first thing I would look for is there a practice for sale in this area? And part of the problem you're going to run into with that is, and I've said this before on the podcast, with real estate sales, there's the MLS, the Multiple Listing Service, which every house that's listed in the United States goes in the MLS. Dental practices don't work that way. I could have 4 brokers working in an area, and one's listing the exact ideal practice for me. I just don't know that broker, and I'm not going to find out about it. Because when dentists list a practice, they're doing it rather nebulously because they don't want to just make it public that they're selling to their patients, their staff. So I would try to get a hold of all the brokers representing my area, might be 5 or 6 that I'm going to talk to, and see if they have anything listed that fits my criteria. And I'll have a certain degree of criteria in my head. I need at least 4 chairs with expansion for 5 or 6, things like this, things that are important to you as a dentist, right? So I'm going to first see, is there anything there like that? And then if there is, I'm going to definitely check that one out. And does it fit within my price point? Because I also have to have a degree of comfort with what price I'm going to, or what cost I'm going to spend, right? Or cost I'm going to incur, rather. So that gets to that consideration. How much am I going to spend? Because I'm going to be getting said funds from the bank, or maybe I have the cash or whatever. And obviously I want this lined up ahead of time before I buy the practice. And the amount of working cap I take is really going to depend on the situation I walk into. If I'm buying a scratch practice, it's probably going to be a little bit more working capital because I have to sustain this practice with no cash flow for a while. Versus if I buy an existing place, there should be cash flow pretty quick because I have patients coming into the practice. Now, because I've seen people start a scratch practice and they're still associating 2-3 days a week while they're working the scratch practice 1 or 2 days a week. But you still got to pay rent. You got to pay whatever employee you have working there. You see, so you have to at least make sure that you got enough working cap to sustain you. So now we get to cost. I saw a post the other day on one of our socials. I forget which, Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. And it's like, person's talking about, you should spend about $750,000 for your first office. And we're not talking about a satellite office or whatever. Personally, I wouldn't spend that much money. Sorry, maybe I'm a cheapskate. Call me whatever you want. I think that's too much. I would want to plan, if this was me, I'd try and find an existing office. Let's say I'd want to make sure it had the chair space, because you'll find a lot of non-producing or underproducing offices rather that have 6 chairs, 7 chairs, or they have 4 and they're plumb for 8, right? And some cosmetic issues, has carpet in the operatories or something, but you can fix that, right? But you might find a place where you look and the place is collecting like $400,000. And you're going to get it for $300. You tack $100,000 in working cap on top of that. You're in there for $400,000. The reason I'm bringing up cost is if I take somebody and I go, good, you have a $750,000 loan on top of the $300,000 or $400,000 in student debt you still have, you're $1 million in debt. For some people, that might be a really big ask and it freaks them out a bit. Versus if you can buy a place that's super inexpensive, 400 grand, it's a lot less pressure on you at that point because you're not in that much debt, and the debt service is a lot less. And the question I would ask anybody if they're buying an office is, what environment are you coming from? And I'm not talking about buying the second or third practice, because if you're doing that, you've already established your ability to build a practice. But if you're building your first practice, how confident are you about this? If I have somebody who they're a good dentist, but they're terrible at sales, they don't really know how to market or run a business or deal with staff, and I'm sticking them in an office and they're taking a $750,000 loan, it's like, would you like fries with your ulcer? Right? I'm just stressing them out to no end. Versus, I had a client I signed up years back. You know how he bought his office? He was in the Cleveland area. He was on his way back from somewhere. He heard about this office for sale. He bought it for $22,000 on his credit card. This was years ago. This is like the late 80s, right? But the point is, he didn't walk in with this huge amount of stress weighing on his head. And the overhead for this place was like nothing. It was $12,000 a month. So he knew he could make that. He wasn't freaking out like, oh my gosh, I have to meet a $70,000 a month overhead. And there's a virtue to that. There is a definite virtue to that. If you've never been part of the business process, you have all this debt, it's like, that might just be a bit much of an ask. Buy something less expensive and learn how to scale it. I mean, to me, that makes a heck of a lot more sense. We've had clients do that repeatedly because we've been telling our clients about this glut of practices coming on the market soon. They've been buying. So you have somebody buy a practice for, $400,000, and now that practice is doing $3 million a year, right? Or buy a practice for $300,000, and now that practice is doing $1.5 million. If you know how to scale, it's not that big of a deal. So you buy the place with 4 or 5 chairs that's doing $300,000-$400,000, and you get it out the door, including your working cap for $400,000. So you're not stressed out of your brain, and you know how to sell and you know how to market. You're going to be fine. Of course, there's lots of transitional stuff and whatever, and that's a whole other conversation. But you're going to be fine. You're confident, and you're able to build this place, and it's going to be okay for you, whether you do an existing or a scratch practice at that point. But again, the scratch practice is just going to take you longer. It's a bit more of a ramp up. But I would be looking for existing because I'm going to get better deals at this point. I can always buy new chairs. You know what? If I take this practice and it's small, let's say it's 4 or 5 chairs, right? And I get it doing like $300 a month, and I bought it. It was doing, let's say, $30 a month, and I get it doing $300. You know what I can do? I can move and build my dream office if that's really that important to me. But then I'm doing it from a position of strength. I'm not in debt up to my eyeballs, and I'm still able to sleep at night at that point. Do you see? So that's why I say, again, situationally depends, but I would be first looking for the scratch or for the existing practice. Now, when would I start looking for a scratch office? Well, generally for me, there'd be 2 situations. One, there's just nothing there. Let's say I find an area, it's killer, and meaning like really a great opportunity for a dentist to be there, and there's just nobody. There's no dentists, there's no office to buy. Well, maybe I'm doing a scratch practice. But again, what would I do? Let's say I've got this practice and I'm like, wow, this is a big area, it's going to explode and there's going to be tons of people and I'm going to need an 8-chair office. Okay, so how am I going to do that? I'm probably going to equip 3 or 4 of the rooms to start. I'll plumb for 8, but I'll equip 3 and 4. You go, well, why, Jeff? Because I'm taking the loan out anyway. Because again, I like to sleep at night. Debt's great. I have no problem with it, but why would I go into more debt than I need to? I'm building 8 chairs. I'm probably going to be lucky to use 3 or 4 the first year, even if I get 100 new patients a month, because there's nobody. It's a scratch practice. Do you see? And again, if it gets busy, if you're plumbed, equipping a room, you can get that done in under 30 days, right? So just be smart about how you do that is the point. The other time I might build a scratch practice is, again, we're assuming there's nothing there. It's always the nothing there. So it's either a great opportunity or there's just no practice near where I want to be. Then I'm building the scratch practice. But otherwise, not really building the scratch practice if there's a practice I can buy. But if, let's say I see an area and there's one intersection that I see every day when I drive home. Okay. I see this intersection every day and I'm like, wow, if you stuck a dental practice there, it would blow up. It would blow up. It's at a convergence of several different routes and people drive by it all the time. There's a business there, but it's not a dental practice. But if I wanted to put a practice in somewhere, I'd go, yeah, and I have to put in a scratch, and there's no practice near this place. Good, build a scratch practice there. That's great. But again, if I'm looking, I'm first looking for existing. Now, if this is my second, third, or fourth office, most likely, I'm definitely trying to buy existing because I need that cash flow. I need that production. I can't have a situation where I've got my office as a going concern and I have this office that I'm paying for that really isn't making any money that I go to one day a week. That just don't work. I mean, people have done all of these things, but I'm just saying, I guess, here's the bottom line. People have done some of this stuff, but I'm looking at what's the best thing for me to give me the least amount of headache, worry, and trouble, right? As I say this, you can always do, because, you could say stuff like this, like, oh, I wouldn't buy an existing office in this situation, and you'll always find somebody who did, right? You'll always find somebody who did, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily the best thing to do. So to sum it up, to keep it real simple would be, pick a place that you actually want to practice, or if you have an existing office and you're looking for a second location, make sure it's far enough away from your first location that you wouldn't compete for patients. Like I have a simple formula, which is if I was marketing an office, I have sort of a square or a circle surrounding. You can use whatever shape you like. You can use, hexagon if you like. But I have a circle around this office of where I'm going to market, right? Well, then if I put another practice in, I wouldn't want those. I don't want a Venn diagram. I don't want these circles to cross each other. I want them to be separate or squares to cross each other. That's sort of the tell for me. If it's outside my marketing radius, then fine. I think we're okay as far as where I'm going to put that office, right? If I'm buying my first practice, I'm going to pick somewhere that I really want to practice. But then again, like I said, and this would apply to the existing office too, because there's a good chance anybody in the United States is probably an hour away from a rural area. Like I'm in the Tampa Bay area. If I get in a car for an hour rather, I'll be in a rural area. And you might be in a rural area already. But I would definitely look at going rural to a degree. I think there's a lot of opportunity out there. People are just leaving on the table and missing. A lot of underserved patients out there, too, and it would be a good place to be. It's just the tough part's finding somebody to work out there. But again, if you're a young person and you're thinking about it, you know what? Especially if a big family is in your future, you can have a backyard and cost of living's less, and it's not a bad place to raise your kids, right? So there you go. All right. So that'd be the first thing. Where am I going? Second thing is how much am I spending? I personally would try to spend not too much. That's all going to depend on, because I'm a big fan of scaling, right? So for me, I'm not a DSO. I'm not going to go drop $2 million in an office. Why would I do that? I'll build the 300,000 office to where it's worth $2 million. You see? So have a certain amount where you'll be able to sleep at night. Like look what the debt service is going to be, whether you're buying an existing or a scratch practice. And are you going to be able to sleep at night with that debt service, including working cap? Don't forget the working cap, right? And I 400, 500, 600,000, fine. If it's like $1 million, $2 million, if you find yourself competing with a DSO to buy an office, wrong office. Because there is going to be a glut of existing offices. But I would apply this to whether you buy existing or scratch. Third thing is, I would make sure that if you're going off on your own like this, that you have the ability to scale. You know how to get new patients. You know how to close. Now, we do have services for that. It's my shameless plug. We have the MG New Patient Workshop. Put a link to it on the episode webpage. And the MGE Communications Sales Seminars, where we teach you how to properly present treatment in a professional way. The average increase from the sales seminars is $300,000 the first year, and you get patients to want what they need. But I'll put a link to that as well on the episode webpage. But I would have that ability before I'd buy. Otherwise, I'm just going to freak myself out a little bit. You could be a great dentist, but if you can't sell and you can't get new patients, you got no patients to sell. You're doing dentistry on nobody, right? Or you're doing dentistry that, just what insurance covers, which is not what you want to do. The third thing I'm going to look at is scratch or existing, right? So I'm ideally going to look for something that's existing that I can buy. If there's nothing there and it's a great place to put a practice, then I'm going to build scratch. I'd probably lean more towards scratch if I were a new practitioner looking at my first office, because there's some advantages to me there. If this is my second or third office, scratch might be a bit premature, although it can happen. If you're building multiple offices, at some point you're going to build scratch practices, and that's fine. But that's sort of the basics on this. I do have a form I'm going to give you guys. It's called the Practice Purchase Evaluation Form. It's from our DSO handbook. It's our big 600-page workshop we do on how to start your own multiple practice, private multiple practice DSO, not like a big corporate, managed care DSO, doing private dentistry, right? But in there, we have a whole practice purchase evaluation form. I'm going to make one of those available for free if you want to use it. If you're looking at practices to evaluate on the episode webpage, just click the link. But otherwise, I'd end off with this. I'm a big believer in private ownership. So there's a lot of younger dentists hopefully listening to this program, and maybe you've been thinking about buying a practice. I think you should. And really all you have to know is you have to be confident about your ability to get, obviously you have to be a good dentist or be confident in your dentistry. But otherwise, to be successful, you have to be able to sell. You have to get patients to accept treatment and be able to comfortably present, and you need to be able to get patients in the door, right? If you know how to do this, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. And you're actually walking into a great opportunity here. You've never had a better opportunity for practice ownership because people aren't doing it. Overall ownership in dentistry has gone from 85% of dentists owning practice in 2005 down to 72.5 in 2024. Okay? So this is something we do need to change so that private dentistry continues, right? So, but you don't have to take one for the team, like go buy a practice that you could be a private dentist. No, you should be, you're confident in your ability to do it, and I want you to be comfortable and be able to sleep at night when you buy it. So my suggestion is buy something small that you can scale, and if you can, buy an existing place. If not, it's a great opportunity to build scratch. Anyway, I know I kind of rambled there for a bit, but I wanted to give you my thoughts on this. I do hope this helps. Don't forget I have that evaluation form for download if you want to check it out. I also have those links to the communication and sales seminars and the new patient workshop. Otherwise, let me know how it goes. You can always email me at jeffb@mgeonline with any feedback or questions. And if you want to know more about MGE, you can find us online at mgeonline.com or call us at 800-640-1140. Folks, have a great week, and we will see you at the next episode.